Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is Shay. If you're coming back, welcome back. And yeah, let's get straight into the topic. Before I get into it, subscribe uh, to, of course, your boy. And yeah, let's get into the topic. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about fantasies, fantasies that we have, and I feel as though people don't talk about enough, because they're afraid of how they'll be perceived if they talk about it. But I'll be the one to talk about it, because why not? I'm a psych major. I take interest in these things, and so I thought, why not? I take a jab at it. Again, I want y'all to understand that this is again a perspective. My word is not necessarily law. I like saying that and talking about it because sometimes we tend to think that you know other people's words are law and that is how we should think. So think of this more of as a data set and add it if you'd like. Take a few things from it if you'd like. But otherwise, let's get to it, right? So it's brought to my attention that a couple of people, and by couple, I mean a lot of people, have experienced something I've experienced in the past when it comes to um, any sort of friendships or relationships, right? Um, and it's this idea about fantasies. Sometimes you've seen it on TikTok, sometimes you might have seen it on Instagram, but essentially it's where people tend to fall for people that they don't even know, right? Like, think about it like this. If you're in high school, if you're in college, sometimes you'll walk around and go to your classes, or sometimes you'll walk around and, take your usual routes or go to your usually study spots, and you'll see someone there that you recognize, and or from your classes, or someone that you may be physically attracted to, or something like that, right? And what happens is you start fantasizing about these people, and sometimes you might wonder, well, what the hell is that about? Why do I start fantasizing about these people? Now, I think a part of it can be completely and utterly uh, natural, because we're humans at the end of the day, and we have this natural urge to procreate and things of that nature. So if you find someone attractive, you might want to be in some sort of relationship or something like that. Um, so completely natural, but then it kind of gets out of hand, right? And again, we start having these fantasies, and what kind of sucks about it is the fact that we realize that we don't even know these people, right? But in our minds, we've created this whole life with them that they don't know about. And we've created this life of them, or we've created this identity of them, and we've created this life with them in our minds that, you know, um, they might not even be like. Like, we've created this identity of them that they might not even be like, right? And sometimes I wonder why we do it, right? And I think it always, again, I think it comes back to this desire of wanting to be in a relationship with this person, right? When that desire is born, you'll start to think about the possibilities of what could be, and because of that, you know, you might want to, for some reason, like, approach this person, or maybe you want to get to know them or have some sort of urge to, right? But and in some cases we call that what? Having a crush on someone, right? Now, there's a few things that I find problematic with this. Okay. One is that I think it is better to actually talk to the person rather than having them sit in your head the entire time rent free. And again, I'll get to the problems in a second. I know it feels like I'm kind of stalling, but I'll get right to it. So essentially, what it is that I think this is problematic because what happens is you tend to create a fake identity of them. And I mentioned this just now previously, right? Is that I'll give you an example, right? What tends to happen is we see this person, we find them attractive, and what happens is they meet a set standard for us. Like we see them physically and we're like, okay, they meet that physical standard. And then we think, what if? So, what if we could be in a relationship? What if this could progress? What if this could happen? And the funniest thing is, this tends to happen with people that are hopeless romantics as well. I've noticed that because I've been in that position. I know other people that have, and I find that so funny because if you're like a hopeless romantic, or at least you think you are, then you think that you have no possibility of being in a relationship with someone. So why do you fantasize? It's because um you want to live in the fantasy of it, and you'd like to imagine that because that's what would like keep you occupied or entertained because you have nothing else, right? And that's kind of sad to some degree, I would say. It's like, you might not have a possibility in real life or a chance in real life, but you have it in your imagination. And this is something I kind of picked up from, as cringe as it may be for some of you, but one of the animes I watched, Naruto, right? Some of you are familiar with the Infinite Tsukuyomi. For those of you who don't know, it's basically like um, the villains, they're like, hey, we're going to put you in a perpetual dream because everybody's going to be happy. And then the main characters were like, no. Now, I forgot the reasoning as to why, but it's kind of like the Matrix, essentially, right? Do you take the red pill or do you take the blue pill? And some people, they don't want to take the red pill. And we might demonize them for that because they don't want to know the truth. But the truth is, some people would be more comfortable being in a reality where they're not in a perpetual state of suffering, where they can imagine a reality that would just help them like even get that slightest bit of like happiness. That's kind of why we take drugs or do alcohol, right? Because it takes us away from the reality of things. Video game, same thing. It takes us away from the reality. It's almost like imagination, if imagination was put onto a screen in some sense. Because you can be a badass at that video game. You can be a badass at these things that you wouldn't otherwise be in real life. You can be a GM Diamond player on Overwatch. You can be all these cool things, but in real life, you'd want to get away from the reality of who you really are, which is like stuck, like buried way deep down, right? So I say all that to say that that is, I think, a primary motivation of fantasizing over actually approaching the person, because now in the modern age, social anxiety is getting greater and greater, and people have less reason to interact with other people because I get it. It sucks to interact with human beings. And it's not fun because you feel like you're putting in all the effort while the other person's like not even trying. But you know what's funny about that? I want you to think about, now we're gonna put two things together, right? And it's gonna make a lot of sense. I want you to think about some of the best friends you've ever had, right? Whether they're online or whether they're in person. And I want you to think, how did we become friends? Because chances are you might remember the moments and times, but chances are you won't remember really fantasizing or actually trying to become friends with them, right? Unless you're being unhonest with your intentions, and like you just got friend zoned or something, and you're willing to be friends with someone rather than being honest with them and telling them you want to be in a relationship. Otherwise, if I, like, for example, if I think about some of my friendships, some of the best friendships I've ever had, I'm not kidding. Think about this, think hard on this. They actually came because I wasn't trying. And by what I mean by I wasn't trying was that I wasn't putting up a mask of any kind. I was just kind of doing me. And I didn't expect anything. That's the thing. That's also why you start having a fantasy, is because you have a desired goal in mind. I want to be in a relationship with this person, because I find them attractive, or because we could be this. As for the friend that you're talking to, you don't really necessarily have a goal in mind. You're not like, hey, I want to be friends with this person. Sick. No, you're just kind of like, hey, let me just interact, see what this is about. And you know what's crazy about that? You're Your brain is working at a different level when you're just trying to get to know someone and not expecting something out of them, because you're trying so hard to expect this future out of the other person when you have the desired goal of being in a romantic relationship or something like that, as compared to when you just want to be perhaps friends. I use the example of friends because I think it's most common within friends to not really care to have the goal of having like a friendship with them. It just kind of happens. You don't remember what you did, it just kind of happened. Like one of my someone I consider a brother, we got so close so quick. It was insane. I didn't know what the hell happened. He didn't know what the hell happened either. It just happened. But now we have the other extreme. Anytime, and I've noticed this when it comes to mostly people who have wanted to have like perhaps romantic relationships with, and I know some of the Muslims will come in here and be like, oh bro, that's haram and stuff like that. Let's be honest, a lot of us have thought about that. Don't try to call me out on it. And if you haven't, great, good job. Keep following your deen. um if you have, you might relate to this, right? So understand that, well, Zion, understand that again, you have an expectation for this person when you're trying to get into a romantic relationship. So already you're going into it with this high bar that you've set yourself. It's almost like you've set yourself a goal with this person. But what you don't realize is you can't set a goal with the person of with the intention of trying to be in a relationship, because that involves the other person to actually, comply. Does that make sense? And that's not in your control. Think about any time you've set a goal for yourself, or maybe perhaps you haven't, but think about setting a goal, right? When you're setting a goal, it usually has to do with you and how you're going to overcome the obstacles to get to that goal. How am I going to get to 225? Okay, I have to bench this much first, and then I have to break the PR, get to 210, and then I have to go to 225. None of that involves another person. Not really, at least. That's you getting to that goal. But in this case, achieving having a girlfriend or having a boyfriend is not an achievable goal. You cannot achieve them because that is something that is out of your control. Understand that. Most goals are things that you pursue and that you can actually take control of. Another person is not something you could do that with, which is why it's not an achievable goal. Right? And what's crazy, you know what the craziest thing about this is? Every time you fantasize about someone and then you actually do have the courage to approach them, guess what you do? You portray this fake version of yourself, and it might be for a couple of reasons. One, you might be socially anxious, so you might not come off as your authentic self or your authentic self. Or secondly, because you're trying to get in a certain outcome. Like I said, you're trying to achieve a certain outcome. And again, that works great for things such as hookup culture. This is why you have the whole red pill. This is why you have the whole like pickup artistry scene, whatever the hell you want to call it. That's why it works so well, because people portray a specific facade. And the reason you realize is that, why are people not content with hooking up with women? Why are people not content with hooking up with men? Why are they not content? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to some of you, right? Why? It's because they're wearing a mask the entire time. And what happens is people like the mask, people don't actually like them, right? And so that constantly reinforces this feeling of insufficiency, and it makes it even harder to come out with your authentic self, because now you've reinforced the mask so much so that if you even slip up even a little bit, people are going to be like, what the hell? You've probably seen those memes about like, oh, when you slip up with like the other friend group or whatever and you do something weird. You know how like certain friend groups you around, like you act a little bit different around them than certain other friend groups? Well, yeah, that's what that's about, right? It's about putting on that mask. That's why they're not particularly happy with themselves. Sorry, just had to make sure I was recording. I was going to be so pissed if I said all that for no reason. But yeah, again, going back to what I said, we put up a fake image of ourselves to impress the fake image / identity that we've created of the person that we want to talk to. And that's a double loss. How do you win when you've created a fake, inauthentic version of yourself to present to this person, on top of assuming and having the expectation that you've thrown upon this person, which is your fault, which is on you, because you've imagined that they like anime when they probably don't. You've imagined that they've liked this, that they like this kind of music, that you wish they would do this with you, that you wish they would go to, I don't know, like marry you, like things like that. It does go as far as that for some people, right? And I'm not going to bog you for that. I get it. Some of us have grown upon very anxious attachment styles, such as myself, I would say, which, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, is, um, in psychology, we have something called attachment styles, right? There's four of them. One of them is anxious. And essentially, you kind of like, I don't know like the exact definition. I should probably like review that. But a component of that is you'll cling on to any sort of love that you see, right? So any neutral stimulus that you receive from someone, like a hi, hello, or hey, bro, she interacted with me. But then, like any secure person who would see that interaction, which essentially a secure person is like someone who grew up with, like the best possible attachment style, they'll look at that situation and be like, no, bro, she was just interacting with you, or no, girl, she was just, or he was just, just talking to you. And you might take that as like a sign of love. So I get it. It is hard not to fantasize. It is very difficult, but you have to try to not do that. And the way you do that is by, first of all, realizing that you're fantasizing. Realize that you're creating images of this person that might not necessarily be true, right? And, well, some of you might have the question, what if my fantasy does match her reality? Or what if my fantasy does match his reality? Then I guess then that's really just up to you. I think you just be very, very communicative about that, because then all that ends up doing is like piling up as like confession. So you could probably approach it in a way and be like, hey, I have these like pile of feelings and I don't know what to really do with them. So like, how do you think we go about doing this? And you talk it out, right? Because frankly, people within the modern day love talking about how they're so mature and everything. But when it comes to conversating, people love ghosting. People don't like communicating. People don't like having hard conversations, and it's not evident to me. So stop bullshitting and actually communicate. That is a healthy way to go about things. And I know I was perplexed at first too. I was like, wait, so ghosting isn't cool? or okay, it wasn't like that obvious. It wasn't like ghosting, like I knew that was like not exactly the best thing to do. But like some of the things that we consider to be like good aren't necessarily good. Like you need to be communicative about everything, whether that's distancing yourself from someone, or you know talking about any sort of like your feelings. You don't have to necessarily express them, that's fine, but like at least be able to talk about them. And in essence, I think that's the masculine approach of how to be vulnerable for men. I think women naturally do this, so you don't really need to be told about it. Perhaps you do, but I'm not a woman, so I'm ill-equipped to talk about that. Wow, I'm out of breath from walking, but yeah, I need to put my cardio up. But yeah, think about that, right? You're creating a fake image of someone within your mind, and you're using a fake image of yourself, or portraying a fake image of yourself to impress that person. And again, whose fault is that? That has to be like, you have to realize that that's a fault of your own, because that person hasn't really done anything. You haven't communicated anything to them. And even if you have, it's fine that they don't want to interact with you or take interest in you, because your expectation of them didn't really meet who they are in reality. That's not who they really were. That became very evident for me one day with someone I was trying to talk to. And because let me be vulnerable about my experiences as well. This has happened to me quite a few times. So I understand if it's happened to you a few times and you haven't learned, because I didn't learn my lesson till like the sixth or seventh time this happened. I was like, what the hell is happening, bro? And even now, I still struggle to get rid of the fantasies. Like the practical way to get away from the fantasy is, again, first realizing that you're having the fantasy, which is I've been able to like crush a lot of mine, right? But some of the newer people that come into my life, it's like it's harder to do that. And um one other way to break it is like the physical, which is not being in the same place as they are, right? That's a great way to do it. So people that we tend to be less familiar with, we're not going to be as attracted to. People who we're more familiar with, we're going to be more likely to be attracted to. So um, I think that's how it is. Don't take my word on that. I was trying to like say that as like more of like a sciencey statement, but I think that is definitely the case. There's something else I wanted to say as well. I just lost it. Yeah, I lost it. I'll have to remember. But yeah, again, think about that, right? Like, and another way we could do it is just by I think to some degree you can logic your way out of this. If your mind comes up with some sort of irrational thought about how they are or how they should be, delete that thought by, again, like not delete it, of course, like you can't just do that, but like observe it and notice how irrational that thought is because you don't necessarily know that thing about that person. Let's say, for example, that you think that this person likes watching a certain kind of show. Like I'll use anime for my example. So let's pretend I think that someone likes watching anime. I'll be like, wait, I don't actually know that about this person. So until you've talked to them, until you've gotten to know them, until you've gotten to know what their personality is like, you don't know them. You don't. You do not know them. And for some of you, that will hit the instant you start talking to them because you'll realize, wait, I formulated a whole personality, perhaps even a voice. So you probably even imagine some sort of voice for them, maybe. If some of you never even heard their voice before, and I get it, right? Yeah, like this is why you don't talk about it because you're like, bro, I think I'm going crazy. Like I haven't even heard this person's voice, and I'm like really, really attracted to them and fantasize about them, and I don't want to tell anybody because people will think I'm crazy. I get it, okay? So if you've never heard their voice before either, the moment you hear their voice, that might be like a breaking factor, right? That might be like a factor that completely like boggles your mind. You're like, whoa, that was not like what I thought it was going to be like. So take them for who they are, and you can't get mad at them for who they are because that's just who they are, right? Let's just say ideally that they've presented themselves as who they are. If they're attracted to you, perhaps they might display a false sense of self to attract you as well. Who knows? But I think that's the way to go about it. If you really are, and I know that's not easy, right? If you really are attracted to someone, then you just talk to them kind of like you talk to anybody else and effortlessly. Because at the end of the day, think about it, right? If you're talking to them almost effortlessly, not putting up this mask, then isn't that the exact kind of person you want to be around? Because then you don't have to put up an act. Because think about, if even if you were successful, think about that. Even if you ended up getting into a relationship, even if you ended up becoming friends with them or whatever your intended goal was, right? Even if you ended up doing that, how long can you sustain that? How long can you put up that facade? Because I know for a fact I've been someone who's put up a mask several times before. That shit is exhausting. Being someone you're not is exhausting. We do it all the time. We're like, damn, this guy's like attracting everybody, or this girl, she's like so awesome the way she wears her hair, her makeup. Like, I want to be like that. So you do it, and then you're like, fuck, like I don't even like doing this. Yeah, it's not who you are. Makes sense. So at the end of the day, you get a win-win out of just being who you are, out of literally just being who you are. That's why they say you focus on yourself and everything shall come to you, right? And although I have like some of my quarrels with that statement as well. But that's a topic for a whole different video. But yeah, um that's what it was. I wanted to go into my own experience of it. So yeah, one thing that broke it down for me was someone that I imagined within my head would be someone who was like perfect for me, like who I thought would be perfect, Muslim, Pakistani, everything. But then like when I actually started talking to this person, I know that one of my standards, one of the things I like is when someone can actually put their phone down and like look me in the eye and talk to me, like make eye contact. I'm not saying you have to like stare into my soul or whatever, but um, just like make eye contact, talk to me, and give me the respect of just like I give them the mutual respect of not being on my phone all the time. It also tells you that that person is like more present in reality and actually willing to engage. And the moment I broke out of my delusion was when I realized that she was not what I envisioned to be. Because in my fantasy, she was engaged. But in the reality, which is something I can't get mad at, by the way, understand that. Understand that this person wasn't portraying the behavior I liked, but that's not something I can get mad at because that's just who they are. Or maybe they thought that, that they're not attracted to me or whatever. So they were just like trying their hardest to display disinterest. Fine, perfectly fine. But see how that can mess with you? Because you then drop down all the way from your expectation. I've talked about this before. You drop down all the way from your expectation down to the reality of it. And you see the truth. And the reason you think the truth is ugly is because you had such a high expectation to begin with. But the truth is the truth. She was who she was. I am who I am. He is who he is. You have to understand this. Don't get lost in the fantasy of someone. This is precisely also why people say see them for who they are, not who they can be. Because what you're seeing is who they can be, right? And again, the reason, and I'd go so far as to call this instead of a fantasy more of a delusion, because again, this involves another person. That is an uncontrollable variable, right? It's like a set equation. Think about it like a mathematics formula if you're a logical person. You're the x variable, and you're not set in stone because, well, you're not like a set number because, well, human beings are variable by nature. We fluctuate. Our breath fluctuates, our emotions fluctuate, who we are fluctuates, all of it fluctuates. This other person is also variable, and that leads to a whole different variable. Even that isn't a solid answer. X plus y equals z, like you don't know what the hell that means. That all adds up to something. But when it comes to your own goals, and when you fantasize and dream, I'd say instead of a fantasy or delusion, when it comes to your own goals, I'd call them more of a dream, because that is like a set variable, and that is an input, and you can control the input. You might not be able to control the output, right? Because, for example, I can make as many videos as I like. I can't control the amount of subscribers I get. I can put in as many cold DMs as I can. I don't control the amount of responses I get. So I detach from the outcome. And that might have digressed into something else. So I'll stop there in terms of that. But again, like I'll keep knocking this into your head and I'll say it over and over again and you'll be annoyed with me. But this is why you can't fantasize about someone. You're creating a fake image of them within your mind. And then you're expecting so much out of this person that they haven't even though they haven't demonstrated literally anything to you. Not anything. And to some degree you kind of also disrespect yourself or devalue yourself. Because you're willing to give them value based off your fantasy of them or your fake image of them. You could do that with anybody. How are you going to be like a reliable or sought out person, right? When you could create a fantasy of anybody in your mind rather than qualifying people and getting to know them and being like, hey, is this person actually deserving of my time and effort? Not in necessarily a narcissistic, egotistical manner, like, hey, you're beneath me. Are you worth it? No, 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 no. Are you worth it? Like I talked about in my previous video. Like for those of you who haven't watched it, please go watch it and sub if you haven't. But it's like for those of you who haven't watched it yet, yeah, it was like imagine each person holding up like imagine your entire being encapsulated in like a canvas, right? And I like using art as an example because art is something you could set a price on anything. Shit, that's why it's used for like money laundering and shit like that too, right? So would you be willing to invest in their art piece like they are in your art piece? Like you have to be able to determine that. You can't just like you don't look at an art piece and fantasize about what it could be. You look at it for what it is and how it's going to look in your like in your house, right? Now that doesn't mean you're like, oh, how's my wife gonna look with me or how's my husband gonna look with me? That's not what I'm talking about. It's more based upon your approval, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody's going to think that that painting that you bought with like a red dot on it is shit. But as long as you like it, as long as you like putting it in your room and you think it's sick, that's all that matters, right? So don't let your family or your friends discourage you from uh from that. But again, like I keep digressing into other topics. But yeah, see how this can be very, very damaging to you. See how fantasizing about who someone could be rather than who they are can be very damaging. You have to admit to yourself that's not reality and that's something that's created in your mind and you don't know that person enough to know if they are the way you imagine them to be. But yeah, now I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit too much. I sound like a broken record, so I'll pretty much end it off there, yeah? But yeah, hope you learned a little something. Take out of this what you'd like. Uh, Message me in the comments if you have a different perspective or anything you'd want to talk about, and like the video and sub if you enjoyed it. And yeah, peace. Take it easy. All right. Good night.